Due to such unique capabilities, one can instill into a fetus the knowledge of reaching the seventh body in just 5 days, the same knowledge which a born child goes on to acquire in 20 years. In fact, a child in the womb gains so much knowledge in a few days which a person cannot acquire even in his whole life, because after taking birth, the capabilities of a human become limited. The child which remains happy in a womb starts crying as it is born. It screams, it cries, but does not smile because it has been cut off from the infinite universe and thrown into a small mundane circle. It becomes cut off from thousands of divine souls and different parts of the universe and becomes linked with just a few humans, father, mother, uncles, and some relatives. It feels sad on being ensnared in such a small social circle. Hence, it cries. It cries for it can do nothing else, and this crying proves that it does not in any way feel happy or comfortable in the new surroundings. The crying reflects its anguish on being forced out of the secure womb into a small circle. Its cognitive faculties become limited in their capabilities, and it hears or receives nothing except what it does with its ears. The child's hearing powers, its vision, and its thinking capabilities become limited to a great extent. Its restricted actions and thoughts reflect the lowly state it has reached, that is, the state of being a human. In the entire universe, a small planet Earth. On this Earth, a small nation. In this nation, a small state. In this state, a small city. And in this city, a small house. This is where he becomes imprisoned for life. It is for this reason that a human is called incomplete in himself, while a child in the womb is said to be in an enlivened state. This state is the best in one's life, for in it one is capable of attaining the totality of life by acquiring all knowledge. When this is the truth, that a child in the womb is best capable of imbibing all knowledge with totality, then should we wait for the child to be born and then teach it? Should we wait for him to grow up before educating him? Should we impart him with a knowledge of dharma and science only after his birth? The fact is that we do not have any other alternative. After birth, the cognitive faculties become delimited and a human loses all spiritual awareness. This is why a child learns only a few alphabets till the age of 5 years, and a person starts to understand life a bit only by the age of 25 years. He starts to realize what life actually is and begins to comprehend the path of progressing in life. But by then he becomes so much enmeshed in the social snares and in material thoughts that he finds himself unable to escape. He wants to discern the truth but fails to do so because he is not capable enough. A human cannot imbibe knowledge and enlightenment with the same competence, and thus he is unable to attain totality of life. There are two reasons for this. Firstly, a human remains surrounded with thousands of problems relating to his family, his health, his work, his children, his friends, and so on. Being stuck up with these worries, he is able to devote very less time for himself. Secondly, the life and the thoughts of a human remain confined to a very limited area. He is incapable of thinking beyond these limitations and being restricted to a small circle of action, he feels himself cut off from the rest of the world. He cannot himself acquire the knowledge of spiritualism and totality in his life, and hence he needs a guru who could guide him. But when he does not meet such a guru, his life remains incomplete and useless. Thus, these two deficiencies keep a human ensnared in the social circle. The first, that is, being over busy, he is not able to devote enough time to instill totality into his life. All his time, all his life is spent in overcoming problems related to his wife, son, parents, family, and the society. The social circle keeps a person trapped in such worries. The society, in fact, does not wish to see any person rising high and becoming fully capable. It does not wish any person to leave its colony of crows and become a Hans. It wants us to remain as we are, fools who remain bloated with false pride. It traps us in thousands of shackles, thus preventing us to escape. And hence, a human, even though he does wish so, is not able to liberate himself, is not able to devote more time, and is not able to achieve totality in life. The second deficiency is that his sphere of action is limited. Eating, working, sleeping is in his hands, but it is not necessary that he shall surely obtain a guru. He may meet frauds and fake sadhus, but it is not at all essential that he shall surely meet a capable guru. Such a guru is obtained only by the fortunate. You shall be really fortunate if you meet a guru, and more so if you recognize him. But the greatest fortune of your life shall be when you devote yourself fully in his feet. If you are not able to do so, then it does not make much of a difference whether you meet such a guru or not. You come across such a guru and walk on without recognizing him. A fragrant breeze blows into your life, but you fail to enjoy it. Spring comes, but you feel no difference. A flower blooms into full magnificence, but you fail to appreciate its beauty. A cuckoo sings out in its melodious voice, but fails to strike at the vibrant chords of your heart. This is nothing but your own shortcoming. The cuckoo shall sing, the peacock shall dance, the clouds shall thunder, but whether you feel anything or not depends on your own capabilities. One comes across several gurus in life, but meeting and recognizing a complete guru depends on how fortunate you are. This is but an irony of life, that even though such a guru is present amidst us, we fail to recognize him, thinking he is just an ordinary human being. We think that just by touching his feet and bowing down before him, we can obtain him as a guru. We think that by offering some gifts and some money, we can attain totality in life. This in itself is not the way of a disciple. This is not the path to totality. This is not the correct approach to life. Rather, sitting selflessly in the feet of a competent guru and offering everything, even one's thoughts, in his feet is the right path of life. The only thought which should pervade your mind must be Todiyam vastu govindo tubhyamevam samarpayet. That is, my body, my soul, my thoughts, my whole life belongs only to you, and I am offering them in your feet. You may do whatever you like, and this is what a guru wishes for. That is, to instill into the disciple's life totality and divine spiritual knowledge. after he has emptied out all his feelings and thoughts from his heart and soul. A guru wants his disciple to become an ocean from a mere drop. He wants the disciple to shine brighter than the sun so that he can then spread divine enlightenment amongst thousands of other people, thus instilling totality into their lives. The Guru wants to raise the disciple to his own level. The thoughts of a Guru are always concentrated in achieving this very objective, but for this the disciple must be worthy and deserving. An unworthy disciple cannot fully imbibe the essence of divine knowledge. Hence, the Guru tests the worth of a disciple very carefully. The Guru first ascertains whether a disciple is competent or not by subjecting him to hundreds of tests, and he does have the right to do so. Also, it is not necessary to make the disciple pass through hardships so that his competence is ascertained, so that tomorrow he does not deviate from the right path, so that he does not end his life living like an ordinary person. When we extract gold from a mine, we know it is impure. In order to make it pure and give it a shape of some ornament, we have to subject it to heat. We have to deal blows onto it with a hammer. We know it is gold, but to give it a luster, a brilliance, we have to put it in fire. We have to beat it. Only then shall we be able to give it the shape of a crown or a necklace. Only then shall it become a priceless metal. Similarly, the Guru rebukes his disciple, scolds him and tests him by making him face problems and obstacles in life. A Guru thus ascertains whether the disciple has the brilliance of pure gold or not. He sees whether he can attain totality in life or not. He makes sure that the disciple shall not stumble or deviate from the right path. It is the duty of the Guru to test the mettle of his disciple, and he should surely do so because thousands of other disciples have to suffer if knowledge is imparted to an incompetent disciple. If the Guru obtains even one competent disciple, then this single disciple is capable of working for the welfare of millions of human beings with the help of the divine knowledge imparted to him by the Guru. But here it is necessary to know whether this knowledge should be instilled after birth or before. Can such divinity be instilled into a fetus? Is this practice still alive today? We have heard and read in the Puranas and the Vedas that a child in the womb can be imparted with knowledge, and thus a mother can give birth to a great yogi or a scholar. But is the knowledge of this practice still present, or has it been lost in the oblivions of time? True knowledge never dies out. It remains ever present in the realms of the universe in the form of subtle vibrations. The Guru must be capable enough to collect this dispersed knowledge from the universe. The Guru must know how to comprehend this knowledge and instill divinity into the lives of his disciples with it. It is easier to instill knowledge in a fetus than into a human, and we surely can impart knowledge to a child still in the mother's womb. But the greatest tragedy of modern life is that the mothers are not strong and capable enough to conceive a child. In the Vedas, there are thousands of examples elucidating that women in those times had a pregnancy period of 21 months. In that era, a child was born only after 21 months of being conceived and after having attained all spiritual knowledge. And such a child would then grow up to become a great yogi or a great scholar. Shukdev remained for 21 months in his mother's womb, listening to every word his mother spoke to him. His father the great sage Vedavyasa instilled into him complete knowledge when he was still in the womb, and after attaining all knowledge he took birth and soon left for the forest for accomplishing deep sadhanas. He attained so much knowledge in just 21 months which an ordinary person cannot acquire even in thousands of years. This is why I say that it is a great anomaly of life that the mothers today do not have a pregnancy period of 21 months. If we wish that great sages are born again, if we wish that Vishwamitra, Vasishtha and Shankaracharya should appear on this earth once again, then the mothers shall have to remain pregnant for 21 months. We shall have to instill into the mothers such a capability, and this capability can be imbibed only with the help of special mantras. It is said in the Shastras that only a child delivered after 21 months is fully developed. This means that a child delivered after 9 months is underdeveloped. Normally, a birth before 9 months of pregnancy is considered premature, when in fact, even a child born on completion of 9 months is not fully developed. The whole world believes that a child born after 9 months of pregnancy is fully developed, but this is the opinion of science and not the Shastras. If you ask of science how a child delivered after a 6-month pregnancy shall fare, it shall say that the child shall be premature, its brain and its body shall not be fully developed, and this is what I say, that a child born just after 9 months is not fully developed physically as well as mentally. This is the reason why the average height of a human being has been reduced to just 5.5 feet. The average Aryan used to be 8 feet tall with a good physique and an imposing personality. In those times, all Lord Rama, Krishna, the sages had a height of over 8 feet. That was the limit of physical fitness, the totality in life. As time passed, the average height went on decreasing from 8 feet to 7, then 6, and now it is only 5.5 feet. The average height of a woman too has gone down to merely 5 feet. This in itself is a physical shortcoming, and it proves that their bodies are not fully developed. This proves that a child born after 9 months is not physically well developed, and when he is physically underdeveloped, then he cannot be mentally developed too, because mind grows with the body. Thus, such a child does not have the physical and mental capabilities of a fully developed child. The bitter truth is that the women do not have the strength to bear a child for more than 9 months. They have lost their strength, and it can be regained only with the help of special mantras. If a strength is imbibed into a womb, if it is instilled with special protection, with the help of mantras, then the woman shall be able to bear the child for 10, 12, 16 and even 21 months. If you wish only humans to be born, then a 9-month pregnancy period is enough. But if you wish great men, great yogis like Rama and Krishna to be born, then mothers shall have to bear a child in their wombs for 21 months. And as this is not happening for the past 100 years, no Rama, no Krishna, no Vasishtha has taken birth. Why is it so? Why is it that no Shankaracharya has been born in the past 2500 years? This is so because woman lost the strength to carry a child for such a long period and to give birth to fully developed babies. For the birth of a fully developed child, it is necessary to instill a divine force into the womb of the mother. It is necessary to accomplish Punsavan Kriya, a mantra practice performed when the fetus is 2 months old. Punsavan Kriya is a practice given in the Shastras and it is one of the 16 samskaras, processes of consecration and enlivening of one's body and soul. Punsavan means transferring a strength, a unique capability into the womb so that the mother may give birth to the child when she wishes. After accomplishment of this practice, the mother can give birth anytime after 11 months or after 21 months. But just as we have forsaken our ancient eruditions and our Shastras, similarly we have forgotten about this special practice called Punsavan Kriya. There is no Brahmin, no priest, no Guru today who can accomplish this practice, and neither are there mothers who are ready to accept this practice. This practice is not at all painful, but it surely is very complex. This is a practice of the Shastras, and in it, the opening of the womb has to be closed and the fetus has to be enlivened. This is not a physical but a mantra practice. When the fetus is enlivened, it no longer remains a piece of flesh but becomes a fully receptive collection of cells ready to imbibe all knowledge imparted to it. It is said in Yajurveda, Sahasrashirsha Purushaha Sahasraksha, that is, a child in the womb is a divine being with 1,000 bodies, 1,000 eyes, 1,000 brains. It means that by instilling enlivening power into a fetus, it can be transformed into a mass of million eyes in the form of cells, thus imbibing in it a capability to absorb divine knowledge. By being born for 21 months, and thus it can attain a fully developed mind and body. Only thus can a Purush be born. Those who cannot become a Purush can only become ordinary humans. And all the children being born today are just humans, not Purush. And they can in turn give birth only to humans. Only one who is a Purush can become great. This is why it is said in the Yajurveda, Sahasrashirsha Purushaha Sahasraksha Sahasrapat Savumim Vishvato Vrutva Atyatishtat Dashangulam. In this mantra, the Punsavan Kriya has been explained, through which the womb is enlivened and instilled with a great strength, such a strength that the mother becomes capable of giving birth to a fully developed child when she wishes. Giving birth just after 9 months is like aborting a fetus, because the child is not fully developed. Such a child will be born and shall die one day. He shall not live on like Vasishtha and Vishwamitra for thousands and thousands of years. He won't attain the greatness of Shankaracharya, because for living on eternally, one has to be born after remaining for 21 months in the mother's womb. And this is possible only with the help of a Guru. The Punsavan Sanskar should be got accomplished through a competent Guru, a priest or a learned Brahmin. On accomplishment of this practice, the womb becomes enlivened with a superior strength. Another Samskar called Chaitanya Samskar is carried out when the fetus is 3 months and 28 days old. While the Punsavan Sanskar is performed to instill a strength in the womb so that it can bear a child for a longer period, Chaitanya Samskar is accomplished to enliven the fetus. Enlivening means that the fetus must no longer remain just a piece of flesh, but must attain a capability to receive and imbibe knowledge into itself. Each pore of the body then acts as a receiver. Each cell is activated so that it can accept all information and understand it properly. Thus, the Chaitanya Samskar is accomplished in the 4th month of pregnancy to start the education of the fetus. Chaitanya Samskar means instilling an awareness into the fetus. It means that a child then develops into a complete man, a Purush. Such an enlivened fetus is a celestial part of the universe and hides all its vastness within itself. Only a guru can enliven the fetus thus and can impart divine knowledge to it, saying, I am giving you this knowledge and you have to imbibe and retain it. The child thus becomes capable of accepting all information given to it.